what we've been preparing for has begun. It's already begun. And this video is going to be for the likes of us to establish who we should have around us at this time and who we shouldn't have around us at this time, because there's an important tool in the box that nobody really talks about that much. We all sort of cover different aspects of it, but we don't talk about it. Now, the idea that I'm going to put forward for us today as free thinkers, conspiracy theorists, individuals, is going to be a concept that is, like I say, covered, but it's not covered in any great depth where you can understand and you go, okay, now I know what war we're fighting. Because we've been fighting a war since 2020, because of you know what. It's been going on forever, it's for endless for time, but I mean, you will see what's happened since 2020 and how people that you thought were one type of person becomes another, and then the ones you thought were on your side are not, and the ones that you sort of didn't expect come out of the woodwork. It's understanding really what we see there and why did this happen. Like, why did these people choose these certain paths when we didn't think they were that type of person? Spotting these people that we allow around us, being able to get rid of certain people out of our lives with no shame and no explanation, just gone, and then keeping and pulling other people into our lives. And this video is a toolbox to show you who you should have around you and who you shouldn't have around you in these tough times that are already here, begun now, this week. Now, the first thing I'd like to say is that these categories that I put are character traits of one side or the other. So when I give you these two warring factions, there are character traits that drag you to one side, and there are character traits that will drag you to the other side. And then there's the middle section, like little branches that may go across from side to side. But as a general rule, you'll be able to use this in order to see who your enemy is, who's friend and who's foe. Now, it's important to understand that as we go forward, you don't want any of these enemies around, because it only takes one in order to destroy everything that you've ever built and done all your life and protected. Now, the two factions that I'm talking about, which are not just black and white, is not you're either, sort of is, but there is, like I say, there is conflicting things in our mind, because we're not just closed-minded. So we may sway into the middle for some of these things, but as a general rule, the war that's going on at the moment and has been going on since 2020 is a war between collectivism and individualism. Now, if I had to describe the difference between being a collectivist and an individualist, and I could put it in the clearest way that we would understand from this community, for people who generally watch my content, I would say that there's two different types of people. There was one that would stand in a room with you and happily watch a group of people hold you down in order to have this done to yourself against your will, despite you saying that you do not want it done and you don't consent and you're not interested. It doesn't matter what your personal beliefs are. These people would happily sit back and watch you get it done, and they would say it was for the greater good, for society, for everybody, and have no remorse about that. No matter what your consequences are, whether you died 5 minutes after, or you had a disability or anything else happened, they would still happily watch, and they would just go, well, you know, you win some, you lose some, but we all got to do this. And it wouldn't matter what your personal beliefs are. Now, the other side is that the individualist, now this is me, okay? I'm the individualist. If I was in a room and I seen someone having that done to them, and they were making it clear to whoever was around them, doctors and nurses, whatever, and they did not want it done, they don't consent, and please don't do it, and they were pushing them off, and these people were trying to hold them down to make them have it done, I'd fight for their rights, for body autonomy. So we're talking about like the ones who are in favor of body autonomy, like myself, my choice to do what I want to my body or not, and then the ones who would make me have certain things done to my body. And that can branch off into many different areas, but that's the basic way of describing how we spot what is essentially our enemy. Now, on our side of the fence is the conspiracy theorist, whereas on the other side of the fence, and critical thinking, the ability to be an individual and assess what's actually going on, what facts you have, and what you see, and gather that up and make a informed decision on exactly what you feel is going on. But the most important part of that is having the freedom of thought, not to just accept what you're told, but to actually look at what's happening, the physical results of what's happening. Whereas on the other side, they will just be told and fit in. They need to fit in with everybody in society and be part of the collective, but put them in a category of like, well, this is, who are you to have an independent thought? This is what the general consensus is, and that's what it will be. So one side gets told what to believe, whereas the other side looks at the facts and puts their own story together. And they may end up believing what the collective believe or not. But the fact is that they will question it. Now, there are character traits to both sides, and it's very obvious when you point it out. Like people on our side, the individualists tend to be very, very creative. They tend to have original ideas, original thoughts, in general, original writings, and tend to have charisma just because of the fact that we don't speak the same way as everybody else. So therefore, by default, we're not just saying what people have already heard. We are being very interesting to people. It's very interesting whether we anger them or we excite them or we give them moments of clarity. Whatever we do, it feeds them a type of energy that, whether they attack, this is why, it doesn't matter if people attack you or not. It's still attention in terms of, it's getting your message out there. And why so many people who are, creative, it doesn't matter to them whether they get the good or bad attention. On the other side, you have nothing. You have no creativity. You are just a follower. Schools today would push out followers, whereas the people who tend to skip school or leave school, not in all cases, but in most cases, tend to be the ones who go on to be self-employed. So you've got employed, the people who like to have an income and know where they're going and know that what they're getting out of life, and be accepted as, basically self-responsibility, right? So the people who would have a natural urge inside. I'm not saying that all employed people are bad. I'm saying that the people who just go out and be self-employed are the risk takers. They are the people that make an educated gamble because they want more out of life. They want to bend reality to suit themselves so that they can have a upper hand in life above and beyond for their security of their family and the security of their friends by extension. Whereas people on the other side who would just like to be in a civil servant who's getting a set wage and they get a set pension and they basically know everything in life. These people will be the types of people who have not got that creativity side. They need to fit in. They need to be told what to do next. As a general rule, remember what I said, that there's a blurry line in between these, where some people who are fully on our side would be employed, and they would be this, that, and the next. But if I had to really sort of pull out what the character traits of on either side, then that's what I would do. I would put them in those sort of categories. The ways to spot these people, the easy way to spot these people was the way they behaved when they were, because at the moment they're pretty invisible, right? But the way to spot these people was the way they behaved during 2020, when they were what I call activated. And when I say activated, I almost mean it like a switch. Like they were sat being all nice and civilized and part of, yeah, we're all getting on great, because they had the money rolling in, they had their freedom, they could go on their holidays, they could go to the hospital when they liked, they could do whatever they liked. And a lot of these things were talked about at the time as being, like almost a strange activation of a sleeping. How would you describe it? You would describe it as a sleeping warrior. No, not warrior is the wrong word. But you know what I'm trying to get at anyway. The fact that these people were sat back as all nice and cuddly and normal, and then they were suddenly activated and turned to very, very nasty people. Rules were passed, things were told to them, and that in turn gave them a power. And I covered this in another video about alpha males, and there is the difference between an alpha male and a male who seeks power is the fact that an alpha male would be a provider, and he would look after his family, and he would want to do what's best for his family and the people that he loves around him. Whereas the male who seeks power, who might be big in stature, might have stood up to everybody in his life and everything else, what is actually happening there is the seek for power means that he hits his wife, that he abuses his position, that he knows when he's already been had, so he tries to take that side automatically, whereas the alpha male would just stand up for what was right. So what you've seen during 2020, if you want to look a bit deeper into the male side of things, is you've seen the males that would protect their family and give you that individual, that right to be an individual. And then you've seen the males who were strong and butch or whatever, but they would do anything for their government and their news media. Making sure I say their. They would do anything for their government, their cult, their news media, to be part of the collective, because what it actually was about was that the majority had the power, and the people in power were looking like they were the ones who were going to win, and it activated them so they could go up to other people and enslave other people and know that behind them is this great big network of power. Whereas the alpha male would go out there and say, I don't care what this greater network of power is, and I don't care if they think they got the upper hand. I'll fight to the death for the freedom of myself, for choice as an individual, and for the freedom of the people around me and my family. So can you see where I'm going with this? Where you can spot the difference. So you see these people and you think, well, hang on a minute, some people I've known all my life and they've stood up to everybody for everything. And they're the alphas and they're the business owners and everything else. And suddenly you realize it was power, not being an alpha male. You're not a protector and a provider. You are just seeking authority and power. Now, another side of that, if you wanted to look for one trait in the other, is the individualist is on their own journey. They tend to look for, whilst we might be part of a larger group, in many aspects of our life, we are not religious types. We don't have to, we have, so here you are, we have self-responsibility. Whereas the other side, the collective, they don't want self-responsibility. They hate the feeling, that feeling that they could be wrong, or they could be made fun of, or they could be, I don't know, pointed out in a crowd. Whereas our side, we don't care if we're pointed out in a crowd. And we're willing to take the risk that we may be wrong, even though because we're pushing boundaries of things that, you know, and people that are trying to narrow down our choices in life. So the religious types would have to fit in. They would have to blame someone else. They are not responsible for themselves. They like to pass off responsibility to other things. Whereas on our side, whilst and they're victims too, everything is external to them. So they have an external locus of control, to use something in psychology, whereas we would have an internal locus of control. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the people on our side cannot be victims, because of course we can be victims, but it's the mindset that goes with that victimhood. You know, people on our side might sort of say, well, you know, that happened to me, but it let me know who that person was, and I was stupid enough to believe them in the beginning. It was my fault. Whereas the person on the other side is, look at what they've done to me. Look at what they did here. I need this. I need that. I want attention, validation. I want, you know, I want these people sued. I want to do better out, you know, because of their demise. Whereas we would just cast these people to one side. We would go no contact and leave them to their own life, because that's what they want. They don't want us. They're not friends of ours. And they need to be cast to one side for our own protection and the protection of those around us. So I would consider this like, I'm going to keep this one under 20 minutes. I consider this a good place to finish this one and do it like a part 2. The most important thing to remember is that if you're an individual, then welcome to the bit of a oxymoron or a whatever, but welcome to the gang, because there's lots of us individuals out there. It don't mean to say that we all believe each other. I see people questioning each other all the time amongst our groups, but the trouble is, on the other side, with these religious types, the people who have to read a book in order to find out whether or not they're allowed to do something, and that could be a book of law, a lawful religion, it could be a scientific book that decides whether or not they're allowed to act a certain way in the world, and it could be an actual religion, you know. But these people that are part of collectivism are not our friends. They are not our friends. They will have rows of people, whether it be us or not, lined up on a wall, and then you know what done to us. And if the reins of power would have actually been able to take over humanity in 2020, they would have quite happily seen us taken off into camps and never heard of again. They would quite happily be like, well, they were the ones who chose not to have the you-know-what, and they're all gone. They must, they wouldn't question what happened to us, because that would be looking too far into their own soul, that not that they have a soul, or into their own views in life. They would just say they must have all passed away from whatever it is that's going around at that time. I'm trying to be a bit careful with my wording so this gets out there. And whereas we would be, taken and they would quite happily watch us go out the door. Now, what we need to do, ending off this part one, this video, is to make sure that we look around us as these coming weeks go on, because we're getting very, very close to the collapse has begun. You only got to look in certain places. We all know it. We've been waiting for it for 10 years. I've been waiting, and I don't know how they kicked the can. Well, really, since 2008, I thought it was going to happen. But I would say a good 10 years I've been waiting for this moment, and it's happening. So we need to look at the people around us in this mindset. Are they collectivists or are they individualists? Would that person see me held down and strapped down to a table and have something done to me, or would they come and fight for me? Would those people at least want that for themselves if it was part of the greater good, or would they want to choose something else? And it's a good way to view and vet yourself, because some of the people, like for instance, I know someone who's employed. They were quite happy knowing that they were getting a certain wage every month, and that was what their life was going to be. And they were quite happy knowing what their pension would be when they retire and everything. But I know, and I've seen it, that they would never expect me to have anything done to them, to myself, in order to make them feel better about life. They would have never made me have this done. So this is where I say there's blurry lines. As a general rule, this is what you've got. So I would say that that person isn't a collectivist, that person's an individualist. They believe that I should have the right to choose how to live my life and what to do. And yeah, opposing being told what to do and then being happy with that. Almost like giving up responsibility, you know. On the one side, the collectivists want to hand over responsibility to a higher authority, whether that be God, government, or I'm trying to think of something else beginning with G then at the top of my head. You know, God, government, or any type of authority that runs under that in their eyes. Whereas we would be realizing that you know, the responsibility is ours. It's ours, and it always has been, and we need to be responsible for ourselves, and by extension learn what we're doing now by discovering who the enemy is for the future, get them as far away from us as we can, and take responsibility for our own lives and our own actions. So yeah, I will do a part 2 of this, but I think as my next video, I'm going to do, I think it's the 25th today, is it? 25th of February, but as my next video, I think I'm going to cover the actual collapse. So if you've heard hints of like what's actually happening and how we spot what's happening now, then you will know that this week is the turning point. It's flipped now, and I'll cover that in my next video. So I'll speak to you all soon. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this one.